God bless you all today. I want to share an extraordinary testimony about our brother Mark Hastings, who had a near-life-death experience. During that event, he says he had an incredible encounter with Queen Elizabeth II herself, an encounter that defied logic and touched his very core. My name is Mark Hastings. I am 54 years old, and like many, I call Ohio home. Since my youth, I have been captivated by British history, and particularly the monarchy. What began as a simple interest during my college years grew into something much greater. I became a historian, specializing in the life and reign of Queen Elizabeth II. I have written books about her, taught courses at universities, and traveled to give lectures about her legacy. I jokingly came to consider her a distant relative. Her life and presence in history somehow gave me a sense of order and stability amid personal chaos. As my career grew, however, my relationship with God faded. I grew up going to church every Sunday, but faith began to become abstract. It was an idea I respected, but no longer felt in my life. If anyone asked me about my purpose, my answer was clear. My career was what defined me. Studying the lives of monarchs and understanding the past gave me purpose and filled me with a false sense of security in the order of the world. I felt no need for God or spiritual answers. For me, it was all in history. 2 weeks ago, however, my life changed dramatically. I was in a brutal car accident on a rainy night. I vaguely remember driving down the highway when everything turned to chaos. The next moment, I was in a void, a state where time seemed to stand still. I was later told that my heart stopped twice on the way to the hospital, and on those occasions I felt like I was slipping into a darkness that was devouring me. In that state of near unconsciousness, one thing became very clear to me. Everything I thought was important in my life, my studies, my academic achievements, the hours of research and lectures, did not matter at all. What I had dedicated my life to seemed to be falling apart. I had spent years searching for answers in history, trying to discover a higher purpose in the lives of kings and queens, but I had never looked beyond the pages of books. Now, faced with the possibility of losing my life, I understood that I had been chasing something empty. What had once been my reason for being now seemed hollow, fragile, and insignificant. On the brink of death, I remembered something from my childhood, a Bible verse I had heard in church. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Matthew 16:26. In that moment, those words resonated like never before. That question became a direct challenge to everything I had thought important, stripping me of my achievements and intellectual pride. It was as if God had been speaking to me all along, patiently waiting for me to look to Him. As I stood there, suspended between life and death, I experienced a series of strange and intense visions. Among those visions, I had an experience that defies logical explanation. I felt a presence beside me, and I saw a figure I immediately recognized, Queen Elizabeth II. It was as if history itself had manifested itself before me. In my mind, I couldn't understand how this was possible, but she began to speak to me, and what she told me changed my life. Queen Elizabeth II looked at me with indescribable serenity and spoke to me about her life, not from the perspective of history or power, but from the perspective of a woman who had also had her own doubts and struggles. She revealed to me that, for all her greatness and the responsibilities she carried, she had always found her strength in something greater than herself, in faith and humility. The conversation was long and detailed, and in the midst of that insight, she conveyed to me a profound truth. True greatness is not found in fame or in the legacy one leaves behind, but in humility and in the search for an eternal purpose. Back in the hospital bed, I woke up with a new clarity, as if the experience had put everything into perspective. Everything I had studied in my life, historical events, dynasties, legacies of power, now seemed insignificant compared to eternity. All that knowledge was like the wind, temporary and empty if not rooted in something eternal. I realized that while I had been busy searching for answers in history, I had ignored the creator of history, God himself. Later, my Dr. Andreas visited me and looked at me with understanding. "Mark," he said in a calm voice, "sometimes we spend a lifetime searching for answers and meaning in things that, in the end, do not fill the void. Perhaps this experience has led you to discover something much greater." His words resonated deeply with me. I knew then that I could not return to my old life as if nothing had changed. Since that day, I have returned to searching for God, with the conviction that my life has a far greater purpose than I ever imagined. All those years of chasing answers in historical texts served me well, yes, but now I understand that my search was not complete without God. The faith I had set aside had returned with renewed strength, giving me a peace I had never known before. I have shared my story, not to be talked about, but to serve as a testimony of how God works in mysterious ways to bring us back to Him. Sometimes He has to shatter our illusions and destroy our vanities so we can see the truth. I don't have all the answers, but I know now that I am on the right path. My faith is now my guide, and what I once considered an obsession with history has now been replaced by a genuine love for God and a desire to fulfill His will. This testimony is just a small part of what God is doing in my life. I understand now that every moment is an opportunity to grow closer to Him, and that even in our worst moments, God can transform our pain into a greater purpose. Dr. Andreas paused, allowing me to absorb what he had just said. His presence radiated peace, but what he said made me uncomfortable. It was true, and I knew it. My life had been a relentless search for answers, but always on the surface of facts, historical figures, and concrete data. I had almost intentionally avoided looking beyond, into a place where I did not feel safe, a space that required a vulnerability and humility that I was not willing to grant. It's like my whole life has been an effort to control something I can't really fully understand, I whispered. The words sounded foreign, but true. I wanted a purpose, something to give my life meaning. And I hid behind knowledge, behind the prestige of being an expert, so as not to face the possibility that, deep down, I didn't have all the answers. Andreas nodded, and I could see in his eyes a compassion that was not just professional, but personal. Sometimes, he continued, we fool ourselves into thinking that knowing about life and understanding its purpose are the same thing. But there's a fundamental difference between knowledge and wisdom. One gives you the facts, the other gives you peace. His words felt like a balm, healing some inner wound I didn't even know I had. I'd spent years analyzing the lives of Elizabeth II and other monarchs, trying to unravel the secrets of power, ambition, and legacy. Yet now, faced with death and the emptiness of not being in control, I realized that what I had sought was not in the pages of history books, but in a much deeper space. But where do I start? I asked with a sincerity that surprised me. It was the first time in years that I had admitted that I did not have the answer. "You are not alone in this," Andreas said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "There is a reason you are here today. Maybe this experience is an opportunity, a door that opens to something greater, something that cannot be understood with the mind alone, but with the heart." It was as if his words penetrated the core of my being, opening up a possibility of faith that I had ignored for so long. I realized that I had always wanted to know God, but not through the rituals of religion, but through a genuine connection, a conversation. Maybe this near-death experience had been that conversation. That night, as I lay in my hospital bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't the peace of knowing all the answers, but the peace of being willing to seek them in a new way. For the first time, I felt like my life wasn't defined solely by my accomplishments or my knowledge, but by something much deeper, an openness to discovering what really matters. The next few days were a mix of moments of physical pain and a strange spiritual clarity. I remembered my conversation with Andreas, and little by little I began to pray, something I hadn't done in years. I didn't know what to say, so I simply talked to God like someone talks to an old friend. I told him about my fears, my doubts, and my desire to find real purpose. After a few days, I was discharged, and as I walked out of the hospital, I felt like something in me had changed forever. I went home, but not as the same man who had left that rainy night. I began to see my life with different eyes, appreciating every moment, every person, with a gratitude I had never felt before. Over time, I returned to my work, but no longer with an obsession with achieving success or prestige, but with the intention of sharing what I had learned. I no longer saw history as a simple chronology of events, but as an opportunity to reflect on the meaning of life, on the decisions we make, and their impact on our soul. My lectures and classes began to transform. I stopped focusing exclusively on data and dates, and began to explore with my students the spiritual lessons we could learn from historical figures like Elizabeth II. We talked about their successes and mistakes, their moments of vulnerability and faith, and how those moments reminded us of the importance of seeking something beyond ourselves. And although not everyone understood my approach, there was something in me that knew I was on the right path. I had found a peace and purpose that I could not explain, but that fulfilled me completely. My life was no longer just a search for knowledge, but a journey towards understanding and faith. In moments of silence, when I was alone with my thoughts, I remembered those words of Matthew. "What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul?" I now understood that my achievements, no matter how great, could not fill the void of a heart disconnected from its Creator. This testimony, this near-death experience, taught me to see my life not just as an accumulation of knowledge or accomplishments, but as an opportunity to connect with something greater, with the very essence of the divine. And while I still have questions and not all the answers, I have learned to live with humility, knowing that faith is a daily walk, an act of surrender and gratitude. So here I am today, not as a historian who thinks he has all the answers, but as someone who has seen the fragility of life and found in it a deeper truth. That truth, which was always there, waiting for me. A truth that I have finally begun to accept and live. If this video has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And of course, share your experiences in the comments. Together we can build a strong and positive community. Thank you for joining us on this journey of growth and transformation. See you in the next video.